Okay, so I want to continue the discussion on the conditions that must exist to go ahead and preserve a democratic form of government. I got out of the office and I just wanted to sort of come outside. I think you can hear me reasonably well. If the wind starts blowing or if it starts raining, then of course I'll go inside. But for now, I just figured this was going to be gives you a change of pace. You're not always looking at the same thing. But my colleagues might be staring at me because the parking lot's down there. So if they think I'm a little bit odd, that's okay. They'll figure that out soon enough. So I want to talk about, again, the conditions that have to exist to preserve a democratic form of government. We're going to talk about a few things. The first thing is that citizens are in charge of the government. I mean, that's the idea. The basic idea is that citizens determine who they're going to entrust their political authority to. As I said to you before, the political power that our politicians have, that they exercise when they're voting on our behalf, that's actually political power that comes from us. And so there's a student walking by looking up at me like, what's that guy doing? Anyways, it's the power that they have, right, that we have, that we give to them, and then they go ahead and vote on our behalf. So in order to make sure that we can do that effectively, that we can figure out who we're supposed to give our power to, certain things have to happen. First, it needs to be the case that government leaders are elected. And what I mean by that is the only way that we can be in charge or stay in charge is if the political leaders who are making the decisions are ones that are elected, that are ones that we get to pick. If all the leaders wind up being people who are appointed or who get their positions because they know somebody or because they're I think it's starting to rain. If they know somebody or they're a relation, they have a relative who's in power. If we're not selecting them, then we can't possibly go ahead and stay in charge, and we need to be in charge. So our leaders need to be elected. Now for us that seems kind of obvious because a lot of them are, but it's important to keep in mind that a lot of leaders that we have, a lot of people who make really important decisions in our lives aren't elected. I mean, the Supreme Court. Members of the Supreme Court aren't elected. When we vote for the president, right, and the president nominates somebody, we vote for senators, and the senators have to approve those nominations, right? So, but we don't get to actually pick our Supreme Court justices. And then there's all kinds of other agencies in the government that are run by people who are appointed that we don't get to vote for. The person who heads up the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, the Federal Aviation Administration, all these different bureaucracies that have a tremendous impact on our lives, those people are appointed. But the people who give them their jobs, those people are elected. And so that's good. The second thing that needs to happen is it needs to be the case that there is universal suffrage. Now, universal suffrage is just a really fancy way for going ahead and saying everybody should be able to vote. There should be, all adults should be able to vote. So it doesn't matter, 6-year-olds can't vote, but that's not a problem. But if the people are going to be in charge, it needs to be the case that everybody can vote. So if the people are going to be in charge, but only people who own property are allowed to vote, that's not going to work. That's not going to put the people in charge. That's going to put just people who own property in charge. Now, it works out that in the United States, we have something really close to universal suffrage. Pretty much all adults can vote, but not everybody. Obviously, non-citizens. If you're living here in the United States, but you're not a citizen of the United States, you can't vote. You can't elect the leaders. In some states, felons, somebody who's gone to jail, even if they've gone to jail for a major crime, even if they've gotten out, served their time, gone on probation, did everything, they're not allowed to vote either. So there are some adults who aren't allowed to vote. People who are in insane asylums are not allowed to vote. People who are in prison are not allowed to vote. And so there are some adults who aren't allowed to vote. But for the most part, I would say that the United States does a pretty good job of going ahead and having this, what we call universal suffrage. The next thing that needs to happen hold on, I have to look. Okay, sorry. The next thing that needs to happen is that we need to have elections that are the 3 Fs. The 3 Fs, You might want to pause and see, pause the video and go ahead and just pause it, and then see if you can think up what the 3 F's are. Elections need to be 3 things, all that start with F, and no, that's not one of them. 3 F words, they're all totally acceptable. What would they be? So you can go ahead and pause it, and then when I pull my hand down, you can pause it now and then come back. Free, did you get that? Free. Fair, free and fair, you got both of those? What about the last one? This is one people have problems with. Frequent. We need to have free, fair, and frequent elections. And the reason being is, suppose we have a free and fair election in 1960, and then the next election is in the year 2000. That wouldn't be good. That wouldn't be good. So we have to have elections on a frequent basis, so that as the people change their minds, they can go ahead and change their leaders as well. And we do a really good job of having free, fair, and frequent elections. As a matter of fact, there are some people who say that our country suffers from what they call voter fatigue, because we have so many elections. Federal elections every 2 years, state elections every 2 years, municipal elections every year. We have a ton of elections, right? So the next thing is that people need to participate in the political process. You know, it doesn't do any good if we have all these things going on if, when it comes down to it, citizens aren't participating in the political process. Well, how do we measure up there? Do people participate in the political process? Unfortunately, not too much. In presidential elections, the average vote turnout, the number of people who vote in an average presidential election, can be anywhere around 40%, 40 or 50%. In statewide elections, that can drop down to 20 or 30%. And in municipal elections, citywide elections, that can drop down to 5 to 10%. So I would say that in this area, people participating in the political process, we probably don't do too well. But here's the thing. Every once in a while, when people have these discussions, they'll point out that in Australia, the percentage of the population that votes is something like 98%. Huge. Their participation level is great. But do you know why? Because if you don't vote in Australia, you get fined. I think somebody told me that it was a $300 fine if you don't go ahead and vote when you're in Australia. Now, probably good participation, a lot of participation is a good thing. But I don't know that I would necessarily want to go ahead and vote for something that says that if I decide not to vote, I have to pay a $300 fine. $300 if you don't vote. Now, on the other hand, some people say that if you require people to vote, or else say get fined, some people are going to walk in and they're going to be like, you know what, I don't even care. So I'm just going to click, 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 click. I'm not going to pay any attention. I'm just going to go and say, okay, you're going to force me to vote? Okay, I'm going to vote for everybody who's got the letter B in their name. Boom, and just vote like that. So it's a big question about whether or not more participation is good. Whether you want to force people who don't want to participate into participating. The next thing that you need to have for the people to be in charge, because if they are going to participate and there are going to be free and fair elections, then they need to have access to high quality information. Now, do we have access to high quality information? People disagree on this. I think there's a difference between whether or not we have high quality information and whether or not people actually use high quality information. I wouldn't venture to tell you what you think is high quality or low quality. Everybody may have a different standard for what is high quality. But I do think that, for example, in the internet, you can find high quality information if you so desire. So there is high quality information, but it may not be the most accessible information. It may not be the easiest information to get. But if you're looking for it, you can find it. And then lastly, and I have to lean forward to go ahead and see how much time we have on this. Okay, we're still okay. Sorry for this weirdness, but it makes it easier here, and hopefully this is better for you. Finally, the last thing that needs to be the case is it needs to be the majority rules. That if everybody does all the things that we're talking about, we have a system where most of our leaders are elected, everybody has the right to vote, we're having free, fair, and frequent elections, people are participating in the political process, and there is high quality information available, that it needs to be that when we vote, the majority rules. Whatever the majority of people say, yeah, we want this party or we want this leader, that's what's going to happen. As long as the majority rules, then we can stay in charge. We can be the ones, we can determine who our leaders are going to be. Does majority rule? Well, actually, no, not really. We'll talk more about this when we talk about the United States Senate. It's not the case that the majority always rules, and even in presidential elections sometimes it works out that the person with the fewest votes wins. In the year 2000, President Bush won the presidency even though fewer people voted for President Bush. That's because in the Electoral College, he won in the Electoral College. So it's not always the case that the majority rules, but I would even go so far as to argue that there are times when the majority probably shouldn't rule. Sometimes you have to protect the rights of the minority. And so, but overall, when you look at all the different things that that enable citizens to determine who to entrust their political power to, then I would say overall the United States does a pretty good job. Now you have to make that determination yourself. Don't necessarily trust me, but make that determination for yourself. How do we do on these six like sort of criteria? Next, we're going to move on to political equality for all citizens. Sorry, I have to find out where the mouse is because it's so... Don't get dizzy now. That didn't help. I can't figure out how to turn this off. I'm going to have to go inside to turn this off. So hang on. I actually have to... Oh my God, I have to walk downstairs. Hang on with me. Here we go. We're going down the stairs. Yikes. The reason we're doing this is I can't... Because it's so bright outside, I can't see where my mouse is. So I need to be in the shade. Here we go. There we go. Sorry for that little fill out.